Welcome to the Walk Around Podcast. Our goal, as always, is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Funsch, as always, joined by Danny. What's up, Danny?
How's it going, Nick? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hard to believe we just crested the halfway point of the year already. Isn't
We're
it crazy?
halfway there. Yeah.
And joining us today to talk a lot about that, super excited about Tyson Jominy. Hey, Tyson, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Well, we're glad you're here. Just a little bit about Tyson, and I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but I think it's important to kind of set this up. Vice President of Data and Analytics at J.D. Power. He's been with J.D. Power since 2009, working with OEMs and pricing and incentives for new and used car sales. Prior to that, worked with Ford Motor Company and Nissan North America, several positions within kind of the finance and sales, marketing, managing financial forecasting, and the M&A sector as well. I think as we talk about cresting this year, the industry's crazy. There's a lot of drivers around that, a lot of data drivers. What's kind of the biggest takeaway to you, or a couple takeaways, and then we can go from there, Tyson?
Well, we've actually seen, remarkably strong sales pace and demand that exists, and certainly coming out of the COVID period, demand has been so robust. And at the same time, we combine that with we've really struggled to keep up on the production side, multiple supply shocks that have really constrained what the industry maybe could have done. And I think if we go back the last couple months, we were seeing a sales pace, a SAR, nearly 19 million units.
Jeez.
Far above anything we were seeing even at the peak of the cycle. However, we just don't have enough vehicles on the ground. And so this inventory situation is really the dominating factor in all the discussions I'm having. And it's driving so many of the metrics that we're seeing in the industry right now.
What's interesting, though, is we were chatting a little bit offline is that it's kind of the top end of the market that's driving a lot of that demand. Is that that's what your data is showing?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the higher you go in the price point, the stronger the demand has been. So that really, once you cross the $80,000 price point, last year, sales were doubling above 80,000. Meanwhile, below 20,000, they were down 30%. And so it was kind of this nice gradient in between that the higher up you went, the better sales did. And I mean, many factors, primarily stock market gains, home value gains, and the fact that, a lot of people, we didn't go on vacations. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't go on vacation. I didn't go to the movies for almost 2 years. And so we've had no entertainment. And so Americans, by and large, have had a good wealth effect. And so what were consumers doing? Well, they were buying, Apple laptops and handbags and watches and jewelry and cars, the luxury cars in particular were doing very well.
Yeah, it's $80,000. I purchased 2 vehicles during COVID, and I don't think combined they got there. But anyways, although if my wife had her choice, maybe we'd be speaking, about a little different conversation. So how long, in your eyes, how long do you see this kind of wave riding? What are some of your thoughts there?
Well, we're seeing a lot of press, particularly, the last couple of weeks, that the chip shortage, which has been the latest cause of the supply constraint, is likely to ease later this year. And it's sort of being taken like the situation will pass. I don't see that happening. Yeah. As a matter of fact, as we look ahead to the end of this year, we see inventory building somewhere back to that 1.7 million range by the end of the year. I mean, if we would have said 1.7 million inventory 2 years ago at this time, we'd be like, what just happened? Where are all the cars? So it's going to build, it's going to get back, but those levels would be nearly record low levels. So it's going to get better. It's really going to be, though, to the end of about 22. So almost a year from now, if not 18 months from now, until we really start to see supply get back to the point that, we see dealer discounting and incentives return.
It's impacted the kind of how both the OEM interacts with the dealer and ultimately the end consumer with rebates and kind of subsidizing some of that transaction. What are you seeing? I mean, I'm assuming kind of they haven't had to rely on those subsidies, which is healthy for the OEM and the dealer.
Yeah, it's great times for both OEM and dealer. I mean, dealers are making record profits on the front end of sales. They're making tremendous F&I profits right now. So dealers are having a fantastic time. JD Power data, we show that the combined F&I income plus the gross on vehicles is $2,800 per unit now of profit. That's
Wow.
up 107%. From year ago levels. And likewise, automakers, I mean, transaction prices are up 14%. In volumes, through the first half of the year, retail volume was up 9%, with transaction prices up 14%, which means that consumers were spending almost 25% more dollars on cars in the market. Just a massive industry, very profitable.
So related, I was having a conversation recently with somebody in a dealership, and they were talking about how their appetite for cash buyers now think about this, from the dealer side, it used to be, I don't care how you pay for it. And now dealers, because inventory is in such demand control, they have a little more, I don't know if control is the right word, but they can kind of dictate how the transaction works a little bit. And if they're not really interested, or if they're not capitalizing every potential revenue stream within that transaction, they're in a position to kind of say no to consumers, which I certainly don't recall that. It's just interesting to me.
I mean, we see right now, last month, 76% of transactions were at or above MSRP. In
That's
fact,
amazing.
now in July, it's early, it's over 80% in July are occurring above MSRP. I mean, we've never seen anything close to that.
I want to go back just a little bit to kind of the average transaction price. I mean, consumer demands have shifted a little bit away from the kind of sedans and into kind of the SUV and potentially even premium SUVs. Certainly some of that's driving it, but there's this big push around EVs. How do you see kind of those two worlds, kind of consumer demands and EVs kind of intersecting?
Well, demand for EVs is increasing.
Right.
It's picking up, but right now it's just hit 3% of market. I mean, they've been in market for 10 years, and it took 10 years really to get to 2%. Now in 1 year we've gone to 3%. So it seems like it's increasing at a faster clip. Now, in addition to Tesla, we see vehicles like the Mustang Mach-E and the ID4 and the Taycan and others that are in market that are pulling in that demand. So it's increasing rapidly, and it's one of the big developing stories. If you're a retailer, thinking about the space, it's probably a good time to really get into it. Because the demand looks like it's starting to be there. But where it goes from here, it could go very slowly. I mean, Americans have been slower to adopt it than the rest of the world, or it could go very quickly if regulation in other states like CARB and others impose, ICE end dates and restrictions. So it's still yet to be determined how quickly the U.S. will transition. But that said, the rest of the world is moving very quickly. And it feels like it's turned in the U.S. and has done so in the past 12 months or so.
So there's a lot of dynamics, and you mentioned, Tyson, we're in a period right now, although the inventory is low, the demand is super high. Some of the different dynamics around, selling at or above MSRP. What can dealers be thinking about? Because right now that dynamic could look great. With inventories kind of in flux, like you said, towards the end of potentially next year, are there kind of chess pieces that dealers could be putting on the board or be thinking about when it comes to kind of maintaining the mid to that longer term to the end of the year profitability? What could they be thinking about when it comes to their sales process with potential EVs coming through, with potential millennial buyers increasing? Is there a mindset that shift that should be happening?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And millennials aren't just increasing. Millennials are the number one buying demographic now. It happened last year. We all were kind of busy with something that was going on in 2020. We missed it. in 2020, millennials became the number one car buying group in the US. And I can't say it enough. Baby boomers have been number one since 1964. Since they arrived on the scene, it's been number one in everything. Well, now they're number two in the auto industry. So now you've got a new buyer out there. And it took millennials a long time to arrive, right? I mean, they had high student loan debts, lack of intergenerational wealth transfer. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons why they weren't stepping up. But you know what? They're further along in their careers now. They're coupling, they're procreating, they're moving to the suburbs. They're doing the American thing, where that's what we do. And then we start buying cars. And so millennials are now the number one buying group of minivans, of large SUVs, of mid-size SUVs, and they are making very quick grounds in premium as well. So what they're buying is changing. They're buying a lot of the lifestyle vehicles that we would expect, but their expectations are different, right? And we've known that they're coming. And as an industry, I'll throw us all under the bus here. We were afraid of them. We made fun of them. Yeah. We sort of put down the avocado toast buying, and then that sort of, let's fear this group. Well, don't fear it. Embrace it. They're here. They're the number one buying group. They have expectations like a better experience, a digital experience. They do their research. They're not necessarily looking for the same things that baby boomers were looking for.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic, and I love how you kind of frame that. Like, hey, we made fun of them, or I don't even know. I don't know that we prepared an experience for them. But I think if they're growing and we all want to give kind of the consumer the experience that they want, I think we need to be cognizant of that. That people want to transact differently, and if we continue to kind of have one way of transacting, it's going to impact that consumer experience, certainly today, but tomorrow as well, when they go to make their next buying decision, it's going to impact it from a dealer standpoint. So,
especially with the dynamic today, where we were saying, 76%, maybe even 80% above MSRP, when it comes to cost leadership from a dealership's perspective as a differentiator, like, maybe that's not the play right now. If you know that the demand is there, you know that the millennials are the number one buying group, what does the experience look like? Where's the friction point in the sales process? How could you be the easiest car dealership to buy from, the most enjoyable, for lack of better words, dealership to buy from, if we know that this is the dynamic for, like you said, maybe another year, maybe another 18 months?
And think about, where millennials are. They may or may not be listening to the radio. They may be more online. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but Facebook has gotten really good at advertising things to me. They really seem to know they're taking my wallet from me. And so you have to be in those kind of places. And I would say right now, don't go, dark on your advertising. You've got to be out there, being in front and center of mind, even if you don't have what's there. Right now, working with the buyer, working with the millennial to find what they want, will put that good experience in their mind as, you're a partner in the car buying experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a stat recently. I think, Tyson, you shared it around kind of prices were up, I think, almost 14% on transactions, but monthly payments weren't. I mean, is that an indicator, or what is that kind of telling us? Monthly payments, I think, were up 6% or 6.5%. Is that an indicator of kind of, I don't know. Is it just creative financing? Is it just interest rates driving that difference down term? I mean, and there could be a multitude.
Yeah, it's essentially three factors are helping to keep that in check. Higher trade-in values, lower interest rates, of course, and extending terms, all three of which are going on in the market right now. But, one thing I talk a lot about when I, talk to consumers is that you have a lot of ways to get a value for your used vehicle very quickly these days. Right. Carvana, CarMax, Vroom, others, they'll get you a number online in minutes or seconds. So consumers can now show up at your dealership with 5 offers in hand for their used trade. And so that's another area to really keep an eye on is what part of the deal the money's going into, what side, because consumers have a lot of options and there's a lot of demand for used vehicles right now. But you put all those factors together and consumers are able to keep payments in check because they have a number of tailwinds. consumers don't have a lot of levers they can pull really when it comes to buying a car. Term might be one of their biggest, easiest levers to pull. But right now they've got interest rates and trade-in values at their backs. If that changes, now that ability to keep payments in check will be jeopardized. And now we're going to see, real pricing flow through to consumers, and that may crimp demand. But thankfully, we're not there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think dealers, like when consumers have that leverage when the used car market, and if you have a more educated consumer or a savvier consumer that is then kind of saying, hey, you can take my trade or leave my trade credit, all that kind of stuff. I think it's just being upfront and transparent, and probably from a dealer standpoint, having some perspective around kind of what the market really is, and if there are others willing to pay it, just be aware, they've got options, as you go into negotiate. So maybe pivoting a little bit, because those are some hard trends, I think, and just the data as a whole. How does that kind of impact the rest of the year? What's your kind of outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, demand is robust, but supply is so tight that it's going to be a very rocky second half of the year in our forecast. As we're looking for the year, we expect it to be about 16.4 million total sales. But if you look at where we are the first half of the year, we're well north of that mark, which means something has to give. And in particular, Q3 looks like it'll be the worst. I mean, this should be good summer selling months, right? This is great, the great time to sell, and we don't have any cars to sell. So Q3 will look the kind of the worst of it. And again, things should start to improve throughout Q4. But you know what? If I could have an industry of 16.4 million sales with transaction prices over $40,000, I'll take it. And so there's a lot of good discipline out there right now. But inventory will build again. It will start to come in next year, and incentives will start to come back next year. But it's going to happen at different rates. Automakers will get supply and get microchips at different rates, which means that your lots as retailers will fill at different rates. So sometimes one nameplate may be more aggressive in the marketplace, and the OEM can't match it because there's no supply. So there's going to be a lot of jockeying here. But overall, it's a very healthy starting point to kind of rebuild.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just looking at some of our kind of data internally, we're now in the second half of July as we're recording this, and we're seeing kind of some strength year over year in new car business. But we're seeing some headwinds in used car volume a little bit, which there could be a lot of different drivers for that, access to inventory. But I think as you just mentioned, kind of watching out for this third quarter and seeing kind of how that shapes up is going to go a long ways to how the fourth quarter and ultimately the whole year end up shaping up. So, Danny, curious, give me some of kind of your thoughts overall on some of this data.
No, I mean, it's awesome. And I love this conversation around, what are the trends telling us? What are the numbers telling us? And then ultimately, what does that mean? If I'm a dealer, what does that mean for me in my area, in my market, with the car that I sell, with the team that I have? And I think that's the cool thing about the data is it's a data point, and you can take it and kind of synthesize it and think through, okay, the macro trends, this is what it could look like. What are you seeing on your dealership floor? What are you seeing in your market? What are you hearing from your consumers? And how could you kind of match that up and see, all right, what's the kind of short-term, mid-term, long-term approach here? Because the industry is always moving forward, and there's always something new kind of coming along. So what about you, Nick?
I think for me, when I think about it, there are things outside of things we can control and things we can't control. And for myself, that kind of conversation around the millennials growing and kind of that band growing, we can control that consumer experience. We can give them the experience they want. I think, it means that there's or I would jump to the conclusion or assumption that other generations are then shrinking as car buyers. And so kind of where is our process focused? Is it focused on the growing population segments of buyers, or kind of the contracting population segments? And so To me, it's how does my process align for kind of the growing buyer? And if it doesn't, what are some simple steps I can take to kind of drive it? So, Tyson, just I guess I'm curious from your thoughts, what's the biggest, the fun fact I think of the first half of the year, and we'll close on that from your perspective.
Yeah, I really think the combination of the sales pace that we've had with transaction price to get that dollars that consumers are spending, that is up 24%. And so there is so much money out there and profit to be made that you don't have to really focus on that one transaction, that next sale, because there's a lot of dollars out there. So stay the course. Even if volumes aren't high, your profits are going to be high. And I think it's an exciting dynamic, because we're on the cusp of a potentially very different industry in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's a great time to take those profits and really look ahead and how can you invest it and prepare for this new buyer, this new expectation, and potentially selling, a whole new kind of vehicle. EVs are not big yet, but they're on their way. And prepare for that right now, because it's going to be here sooner than you think.
Yeah. Well, Tyson, this conversation's been great. We appreciate you joining us today. Always grateful for kind of your thought leadership, certainly JD Power in the marketplace, and providing analytics and data and certification to the industry. So thank you for that. Danny, this has been a good one. I love getting into the data. For those of you that enjoyed it as much as I do, make sure to like and share it with your friends, and then shoot us a note. Let us know what other topics you'd love to explore. So thank you.